Hey there, welcome to the College Investor Audio Show. We are truly honored that you are here today as we take a look at this question. Can President Trump claw back student loan forgiveness? Whew, it's going to be a doozy. But first, just want to remind you before we get into it that you can always follow us all over social media. Just search for The College Investor and you'll find us pretty much wherever you are. Also, dive deeper on any topic we talk about on the podcast at our website. Everything is there. It's amazing. thecollegeinvestor.com. All right, let's take a look. Can President Trump claw back student loan forgiveness? Well, like most Republicans, Trump generally doesn't support student loan forgiveness and would likely seek an end to some loan forgiveness programs. But could he claw back student loan forgiveness that has already been granted? Let's take a look. First, let's take a look at Trump's position. So, during his first term, his administration proposed eliminating the Public Service Loan Forgiveness, or PSLF, program. This was reflected in the annual education appendices of the president's budgets for fiscal years 18, 19, 2020, and 2021. Quick example. The FY 2021 budget sought to replace the existing income-driven repayment, or IDR plans, with a single plan that would be ineligible for PSLF. The 2021 budget described the proposed single IDR plan as kind of a streamlined repayment option intended to reduce complexity. And if you want to dive deeper into that so I don't have to read a bunch of legal jargon, you can find it inside this article at thecollegeinvestor.com. Importantly, the budget proposal noted that existing borrowers would be grandfathered in, allowing those who borrowed prior to July 1st, 2021, to kind of continue accessing the original IDR plans and PSLF. As with the single plan, these policies would apply to loans originated on or after July 1st, 2021, with an exception for students continuing to borrow to complete their current course of study. That was a direct quote from the budget. The language in the previous budgets was substantially similar. The repeated efforts to eliminate PSLF were unsuccessful, though. Well, that's primarily because Congress created these programs through legislation, and only Congress has the authority to repeal them. This highlights the limits of executive power in altering statutory programs. Oh, the checks and balances of our government are great. In addition to budget proposals, President Trump took executive action on student loans. On August 21st, 2019, he signed an executive memorandum that forgives the federal student loan debt of 25,000 disabled American veterans, and established a data match between U.S. Department of Education and the Department of Veterans Affairs to streamline future student loan discharges for disabled veterans. Following the U.S. Supreme Court decision in Biden versus Nebraska, on June 30th, 2023, which blocked President Biden's broad student loan forgiveness plan, the Trump campaign issued a press release on July 6th, 2023, praising the ruling. You can find that online. I don't have to read it. While there are no student loan proposals on the Trump campaign website yet, his remarks during the September 10th, 2024 presidential debate criticized Biden's efforts, calling them a total catastrophe. He argued that Biden's plan misled borrowers with false hopes of debt relief, leading to frustration and disappointment among students who expected their loans to be forgiven. The Heritage Foundation's Project 2025, although not formally endorsed by President Trump, contains policy recommendations that do align with many of his administration's priorities. Note that Lindsay M. Burke, author of the Department of Education chapter, has no connection to the Trump administration at all. If you want to read a few of the important excerpts from the Department of Education chapter concerning student loan forgiveness, you can check it out inside this article at thecollegeinvestor.com. Let's take a look at the current state of student loan forgiveness. As of November 2024, Biden has provided $175 billion in student loan forgiveness for 4.6 million borrowers, more than any previous president. Some of these borrowers are worried that a new president might be able to reverse the student loan forgiveness that they have already received. Can the president revoke previous loan forgiveness? Let's take a look. No. All right, and that is our show for today. I'm just kidding. Okay? But the president cannot retroactively revoke student loan forgiveness once it's been finalized. finalized. But once the federal government discharges a borrower's debt and the borrower has received all that notification, the forgiveness is, forgiven, like it's done. Although the eligibility criteria for future borrowers can be changed, forgiveness that's been provided is legally binding and typically irreversible. Legal precedents and court rulings. Historically, courts have treated student loan forgiveness as sacrosanct and protected from retroactive reversal. There's a ruling, Alaska versus U.S., that talks about this, and another ruling, Missouri versus Biden, which also talks about this as well. Legislative and contractual protections, too. The federal government also generally doesn't attempt to claw back forgiveness once it has been granted, and retroactively changing the terms of forgiveness would likely face significant legal challenges. If Congress were to pass a law repealing a forgiveness program, like the PSLF, existing borrowers would typically be grandfathered in, of course. Changes would apply only to new borrowers, defined as individuals who, on the specified date, have no outstanding federal student loan balance. Let's go into due process and promissory estoppel. This is interesting. Retroactively removing loan forgiveness would likely violate due process and could be challenged in court under the principle of promissory estoppel, which prevents the government from revoking a promise that borrowers have relied upon. The Master Promissory Note, or the MPN, which borrowers sign when taking out federal student loans, outlines the specific terms and conditions under which loans may be forgiven or discharged. It explicitly references the Higher Education Act of 1965, providing a legal basis for forgiveness programs. Has student loan forgiveness ever been reversed, though? Well, in February 2024, a small number of borrowers experienced a reversal of loan forgiveness under the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program by the Federal Loan Service Officer, or a Federal Loan Service Officer, MOHELA. However, this was not a case of clawing back properly granted forgiveness. Rather, the forgiveness had been granted in error because of incorrect information. All right, so the reversal affected borrowers who had mistakenly been credited with qualifying payments that they didn't actually make. An audit by the U.S. Department of Education found discrepancies in the data, particularly involving incorrect dates on the borrower's PSLF employment certification forms. All these errors resulted in borrowers receiving PSLF credit despite not even meeting the requirements. It's important to distinguish between correcting an error and a true clawback of forgiveness. In this instance, the forgiveness was reversed because it was just a big mistake. So, the federal government does retain the authority to revoke loan discharges when a borrower is found to be ineligible based on the criteria in effect at the time of forgiveness. This just ensures that forgiveness programs are administered correctly and in accordance with the established guidelines, maintaining fairness for everybody who comply with the program's requirements. So, student loan forgiveness can be revoked for future borrowers. This is what we're talking about. The federal government has the authority to modify the requirements for forgiveness and discharge, but these changes only apply to future people. Once a loan has been forgiven under existing rules, it cannot be revoked retroactively. However, eligibility criteria for new borrowers can be adjusted based on the method by which the forgiveness program was established. Changes to statutory loan forgiveness. If a loan forgiveness program was created through legislation, only Congress has the power to modify or revoke it, like we talked about earlier. The president can't unilaterally eliminate statutory forgiveness provisions, like by executive action, for instance. To modify these, Congress has to pass a new law, which requires a majority vote in the House and typically a supermajority, or 60 votes, in the Senate to overcome a filibuster. There are exceptions, such as the use of a budget reconciliation bill, which can pass with a simple majority vote in the Senate. However, the Byrd Rule restricts the scope of such bills to provisions that have a direct impact on the federal budget, preventing non-budgetary policy changes. Additionally, changes to Senate procedures, such as eliminating the filibuster, could alter the legislative process. And they are talking about that dadgum filibuster quite a bit, aren't they? Anywho, let's move on to changes to regulation-based forgiveness programs, because you might have questions about that too. So when loan forgiveness programs are established through federal regulations, the U.S. Department of Education can amend or repeal these regulations. So the process, however, can actually take up to a year because of the requirements of the rulemaking process. So if new regulations are published in the Federal Register by November 1st, they typically take effect on the following July 1st. In some cases, the Secretary of Education may expedite implementation. Congress also has the option to block existing regulations by passing a law, though this requires legislative action. Congress can also block new regulations within 60 legislative days under the Congressional Review Act. There are a few examples, 3 of them, of regulation-based programs: pay-as-you-earn repayment or PAY, revised pay-as-you-earn repayment, REPAY, and saving on valuable education or the SAVE program. While borrower defense to repayment was initially established by law, the specific rules and criteria have been shaped through regulations, making them subject to modification through the regulatory process. Last thing we'll talk about before we conclude today: changes to executive order-based forgiveness policies. If a forgiveness policy was created via executive order, it can be modified or revoked by a subsequent executive order. However, executive orders cannot override loan forgiveness programs established by legislation or regulations. An example of this would be like bankruptcy discharge policy for student loans. Although the standard for undue hardship in the bankruptcy discharge of student loans is codified in the U.S. Bankruptcy Code, additional criteria like the Brunner test and the totality of circumstances test were developed by the courts. In 2023, the Biden administration implemented a policy to reduce the government's opposition to bankruptcy discharge petitions in certain cases, such as when the cost of collection exceeds the expected recovery. The policy could be reversed by a future executive order, altering the government's stance on bankruptcy discharges without changing the underlying law. Are you tracking with me? I hope so. Conclusion? In summary, once a borrower's student loan has been discharged, the forgiveness is generally irrevocable. Legal precedents, statutory frameworks, and contractual obligations outlined in the Master Promissory Note protect borrowers from retroactive changes. While future legislation can modify forgiveness programs for new borrowers, existing recipients of forgiveness are typically shielded from any clawbacks or reversals. I hope that gave you some peace of mind today. That is our show. If you want to find out more, lots of resources are included inside this article to dive in deeper on this at thecollegeinvestor.com. You can also follow us all over social media. If you have any questions about anything at all, we'd love to help you along in your money journey. Just get in touch with us. Search for The College Investor and you'll find us. Thanks again for stopping by today, and we'll talk to you again real soon.